It seems that Democrats on this committee, sort of like Peter Pan and Tinkerbell, if they say Project 2025 enough, their presidential candidate becomes alive again.
You probably want less bureaucracy, right?
I do.
I want less bureaucracy. You want more efficiency.
I do.
I want more efficiency. You want taxpayer money spent wisely.
I do. Congrats on becoming a Republican.
Because we found some receipts. You did say, I think homosexual activity is a sin.
Yes, I'm a religious Jew.
I'm
That's
sure
true.
There's a genetic component.
You found me out.
Orientation. But the view of all religious people I know has always been that sexual behavior is something that is up to you. And you said, I may have a desire to sleep with many women, but I do not.
I agree with me. Yes, that's true.
Congratulations on your,
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Hope all is good wherever you are. In this video, we're going to watch some clips of yesterday's congressional hearing that I'll link the full 3.5 to 4 hour video in the description down below, should you want to look at it, where Ben Shapiro was there to testify on pretty much censorship in social media. He talked about GARM, which is a conglomerate that owns and represents 90% or so of every single advertising dollar spent online. In essence, though, GARM is the flagship product of the WEF. It's far more damaging to social media, especially conservatives in this case, than all the other buzzwords like DEI and all that stuff. First, we're going to watch Ben Shapiro's opening speech, and then we're going to watch the best part of it, where he absolutely crushes Democrat Eric Swallowswell. So let's get into it.
Chairman Jordan, Ranking Member Nadler, members of the committee, good morning. First of all, Ranking Member Nadler, I appreciate the kind words about our business. It's very kind of you. And also, I assume that we'd be doing a lot better without the institutional obstacles that I'm about to discuss. We're in the midst of a trust crisis in the world of media, which is because so many in the legacy media have lied in order to preserve left-leaning narratives. To take just the most recent example, we were told by the legacy media that President Biden was just fine. For years, anyone who questioned his health and mental fitness was trafficking in cheap fakes. And then President Biden went out and engaged in a full-scale mental collapse on stage in front of hundreds of millions of people. So we can see why Americans, at least Americans who are not Democrats, do not trust the media. The question isn't really why the legacy media have lost Americans' trust. We know that answer. The question is why, despite that loss of trust, the legacy media continue to gain share in the advertising market. And the answer is simple. There is, in fact, an informal pressure system created by Democratic legislators, this White House, legacy media, advertisers, and pseudo-objective brand safety organizations. That system guarantees that advertising dollars flow only to left-wing media brands. Let me explain how this works. When a conservative competitor to the legacy media arises, members of that legacy media and their political allies rush to paint such competitors as dangerous. The commentator Kara Swisher of the New York Times, for example, told the head of YouTube that my videos at Daily Wire were a, quote, gateway drug that would lead children, including her own teenage son, to watch neo-Nazi content. Never mind the yarmulke. Elected Democrats pick up that same messaging. In 2017, Senator Dianne Feinstein told lawyers at Facebook, Google, and Twitter, quote, you created these platforms and now they're being misused, and you have to be the ones to do something about it, or we will. Social media companies react to incentive structures, including threats. They've responded by adopting the standards of third-party left-wing informational safety groups like the Global Alliance for Responsible Media, or GARM. GARM purportedly sets brand safety standards, objective standards by which advertisers and platforms can supposedly determine just what sort of content ought to be deemed safe for advertising. In reality, GARM acts as a cartel. Its members account for 90% of ad spending in the United States, almost $1 trillion. In other words, if you're not getting ad dollars from GARM members, it's nearly impossible to run an ad-based business. And if you're not following their preferred political narratives, the ones that Kara Swisher and Dianne Feinstein would follow, you will not be deemed brand safe. Your business will be throttled. We at Daily Wire have experienced this firsthand. In 2017, after Senator Feinstein made her threats to bring the weight of government down on social media platforms, Daily Wire YouTube channel saw a 1,000% increase in content enforcements over a 2-year period. Since 2021, after Democrat officials further turned up the heat on social media companies, my personal Facebook page has seen an over 80% drop in impressions. Or take Joe Rogan. When Joe said that he had taken ivermectin after getting COVID, White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki pressured Spotify to take action, stating, quote, we want every platform to be doing more to call out mis- and disinformation while also uplifting accurate information. Spotify complied. Spotify, of course, works with GARM. So, what are the brand safety standards that GARM uses? The standards begin with inarguable things that we've heard from the other witnesses, like preventing distribution of child sexual abuse material or stopping terrorism. But GARM doesn't draw the line at what is criminal, abusive, or dangerous. Their standards also include restrictions on hate speech, harassment, misinformation, or my personal favorite, insensitive, irresponsible, and harmful treatment of debated, sensitive social issues. Those criteria are highly subjective in theory, and they are purely partisan in practice. For example, last year, Daily Wire host Matt Walsh was fully demonetized on YouTube, a GARM member. Why? For quote-unquote misgendering, which to GARM is to say that men are not women. Perfectly obvious facts now run afoul of GARM's censorship standards. Companies targeted by GARM, like the Daily Wire, Breitbart, Fox News, and so many others, reach hundreds of millions of people with opinions and beliefs long established as within the mainstream of American conservative thought. GARM and its members have no respect for the beliefs of those people. They would like them marginalized or squashed. It's time to stand up for the First Amendment in this Congress. Congress can do so in two ways. First, Congress must investigate the informal and perhaps formal arrangements between censorship cartels like GARM and executive branch agencies. The Daily Wire has already filed a federal lawsuit against the State Department for allegedly doing just this. Second, Congress can itself stop engaging in violation of free speech principles. 2 weeks ago, writing in dissent in Murphy versus Missouri, Justice Alito condemned what he called sophisticated and coercive government campaigns against free speech. Members of this committee have engaged in precisely such campaigns. When Congressman Schiff speaks about targeting social media companies that must be, quote, pulled and dragged into this era of corporate responsibility because they are too tolerant of misinformation, he knows what he is doing. He is participating in a sophisticated, coercive campaign against free speech. When Congresswoman Jayapal blames social media for placing America at the, quote, precipice of a democratic crisis and calls on them to target they deem hate groups, she also knows what she is doing. She is participating in a sophisticated, coercive campaign against free speech. When Congressman Hank Johnson says, quote, we need a constitutional amendment to allow the legislature to control the so-called free speech rights of corporations, he also knows what he is doing. We all know what these government actors, what some people in this room are doing. You're using the tacit threat of government action to compel private companies to throttle viewpoints you don't particularly like. The First Amendment was not designed to enable workarounds by elected officials. It was directed at Congress, at you, and you're abdicating your fundamental duty when you exert pressure on private companies to censor speech. Some in this room have been doing just that for years. We in the non-legacy media have been feeling the effects. In the name of the Constitution and in the name of democracy, this should stop.
I know a lot of people that follow this channel or who are on the conservative side maybe don't like Ben Shapiro because of his geopolitical views. And I think that's perfectly reasonable if you have that view. But let's not get it twisted here. Ben Shapiro on our side is an absolutely net force for good. That's why I don't like seeing when we fight amongst conservatives. Ben Shapiro, the Daily Wire, whatever you think of Ben and Jeremy Boring, they're a force for good. And I thought that opening statement was brilliant. And also the fact that Ben can say 10,000 words in 5 minutes. Insane. Now, one of the things he's talking about here when he talks about GARM and social media and government working hand in hand is not necessarily direct censorship, right? It's if a certain person on the left that was in government went to YouTube, let's say, and said, that Ben Shapiro fella, I'd watch out for that guy. I don't really like that guy. Then YouTube would probably take that as a hint to limit his reach. He talks about the Daily Wire and conservative media having been subject to a 1,000% increase in censorship and 80 times more YouTube censorship. Like 1,000% increase. That's insane. He talks about his reach on Facebook, right? 80% drop in impressions. That's pretty much being shadow banned. That's what that is. Now, GARM, like Ben mentioned, and like I said at the beginning of the videos, represents 90% of all ad dollars spent on the internet. 90%. Their standards include restriction on hate speech, harassment, misinformation, but then again, like, they get to dictate that. Now, we can all agree that some of the things that they do might be good, like protect the kids. We can all agree on that, right? But there's a lot of stuff out there that they get to say, and nobody can define what they mean by it. Oh, this is hate speech, this is harassment, this is misinformation, or my personal favorite, irresponsible and harmful treatment of debated, sensitive social issues. I don't even know what that means. And what he's saying here is you can interpret these rules any way you want, but they're only getting enforced against conservative content. There was one point in the live stream, and again, if you want to watch it, it's linked down in the description down below, where Ben asked, because he's noticed that this is only happening to conservative content, he said, well, give me one conservative social media channel or platform that, in your opinion, doesn't put out any harmful restriction content or hate speech or anything of the sorts, and they couldn't name one. They said there's a list of like 600 on there, but they couldn't name one because the politicians and GARM, they work hand in hand. We know from what's happened with Facebook in the past and look at the Twitter files that the government is more than happy to just make a phone call and have anything that they don't want out there be called misinformation. Remember, a certain laptop by a certain crackhead. What's even more concerning is that there's platforms out there like Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it, owned by Elon Musk, that's supposed to be a free speech platform, but they just signed 7 days ago to be represented by GARM. GARM seeks to control free speech online. They're trying to censor Rogan for having an opinion. Rogan's not a doctor, but he had an opinion, which today is an opinion that I'm glad I had the same one, when he said that healthy people shouldn't take the jab. And a lot of people, we look at these hearings and we say, oh, it's just theater, nothing ever happens from it. But at the same time, it is good that this stuff gets out there. And good on Ben for being on Capitol Hill and doing this. The irony of calling Ben a neo-Nazi is just, I think it's lost on the Democrats there. I don't think there was one single inaccuracy in that entire first segment. Well done, Ben Shapiro. Now we're going to move on to the best part of this whole hearing, when Eric Swallowswell thought he had, I don't know, a leg up on Ben Shapiro here. Maybe he thought he was smarter and tried to get him. And this backfired royally. And he got absolutely laughed at by the whole crowd, destroyed. It's a thing of beauty. Get your popcorn ready. Let's get into it.
Last couple weeks, talked a lot about and Googled Project 2025. It's one of the most Googled search terms right now. And you're not going to get any censorship from me. So I just wanted to know, from your perspective, I think it would help us understand, on just like a scale of 0 to 100%, how much do you support Project 2025?
I think, like President Trump, I haven't looked all that deeply at Project 2025, but it seems that Democrats on this committee, sort of like Peter Pan and Tinkerbell, if they say Project 2025 enough, their presidential candidate becomes alive again.
And so, well, let's just talk about pieces of it, and I guess you can tell me if you support it. You probably want less bureaucracy, right?
I do.
I want less bureaucracy. You want more efficiency?
I do.
I want more efficiency. You want taxpayer money spent wisely?
I do. Congrats on becoming a Republican.
Yeah. Yeah. My parents would be proud. Mass deportations, it calls for that. Do you support that part?
I support the deportation of any illegal immigrant who's in the United States who is not of benefit to the generalized American public.
So if they're picking agriculture that puts food on the tables of everyday Americans, they've never committed a crime inside the United States, they didn't come across with documents, should they be deported?
If they have not paid taxes and if their draw on the taxpayer benefits are larger than the contribution they are making to the economy, or if they're involved in criminal activity, they should be deported.
How do we measure that?
The same way that the IRS measures my income every year. It seems like if the IRS can track down every aspect of every receipt that I've ever submitted, and
so
they can do so for hundreds of millions of other Americans, they can do that for illegal immigrants as well, except for the fact that no one knows how many are in the country thanks to this administration.
So you would be cool with creating a system where they could pay those taxes if they wanted to, and then stay and work and put food on our table?
It depends on how long it would take for them to pay the taxes, and they would also have to go presumably to the back of the line, although I'm not sure why I'm testifying about immigration policy at this point.
How about banning the abortion pill? That's part of Project 2025. Do you support that part?
I think that that's a state-by-state issue on a personal level.
I'm just asking you.
Sure, I'm a fully pro-life person, which means that I'm not in favor of the distribution of the abortion pill.
Banning same-sex marriage, what about that part?
I am in favor of traditional marriage between a man and a woman, and I'm perfectly fine with anyone having any sort of voluntary sexual arrangement they seek. That's a different thing from whether the government should attach benefits to that personal relationship.
But you think it's a sin to have same-sex marriage?
I mean, I'm confused. Are you asking me as a religious Jew what I think about biblically?
I'm just asking, is it a sin to be gay?
Is it a sin to be gay? I mean, how long do we have here? 2 minutes? I mean, if the basic idea is that sexual orientation is up for government regulation, I'm not in favor of the government regulating the private consenting sexual activity of adults. That is a different thing, once again, from whether the government ought to engage in actual benefits for particular sexual arrangements that adults make.
But again, just you to me, is it a sin or not?
From a religious Jewish perspective, orientation is not a sin, but activity is. That's also the same perspective of most major religions, so far as I'm aware.
Okay. And how about cutting Social Security? Do you support that part of 2025?
I'm not sure what Project 2025's position on Social Security is. I'm in favor of the restructuring of Social Security along the lines of privatization and lowering and increasing the retirement age, because you, as well as every other congressperson, knows Social Security is going to go bankrupt, and yet everyone seems to have an interest in lying about it for the next decade and a half until we have to take austerity measures or radically increase inflation or taxes.
And bans against books about slavery. Do you support that part about?
Why would I possibly be in favor of bans about books about slavery? That would be absolutely ridiculous. What I am in favor of is the idea that school libraries should be able to make decisions along the lines of what exactly is appropriate for, say, a 7th grader and whether they ought to be treated to cartoons and genderqueer. That's not quite the same thing.
And just because we found some receipts, you did say, I think homosexual activity is a sin.
Yes, I'm a religious Jew,
I'm
that's
sure
true.
there's a genetic component
You
to
found me out.
orientation, but the view of all religious people I know has always been that sexual behavior is something that is up to you. And you said, I may have a desire to sleep with many women, but I do not.
I agree with me. Yes, that's true.
Congratulations on your, I'm sure it's very hard to restrain yourself.
Fantastic. I will agree with myself, the man said, while everybody laughed at that poor Democrat. This was fantastic. And everything Ben said just sounds like awful. Total fascism by the left when government starts to tell companies on their behalf to not give them advertising. Like Ben talked about, he said I'm blessed, I'm lucky, I have a thriving multi-million-dollar company. But what about the smaller conservative companies, YouTubers out there that are getting censored? Myself, I do it because I enjoy it. I have 2 companies myself, not as successful as Ben Shapiro's, but I do quite well. And I'm also much more closer to 40 than I am to 30. But what about the young guys out there, the 20-year-olds coming up who want to stand up for truth and just out there being censored? Ben gave him hell. I really enjoyed this. I thought it was fantastic. Let's hope that in November we get the result that we want. I hope you enjoyed this video, everybody. If you did, consider subscribing to the channel. Help it grow. Reach more people. Leave a thumbs up on the video. Catch you all in the next video. Peace out, everybody.